One of the things we have been keeping an eye on this week as we approach this Charlottesville anniversary this weekend is an effort by the victims of the neo-Nazis and white supremacists in Charlottesville to try to get justice for what was done to them. 10 people who were hurt by these violent white supremacists in Charlottesville 2 years ago, including 3 people who were hit by the car that killed Heather Heyer, are now plaintiffs in a lawsuit that is designed to go further than the individual criminal charges that were brought against individual rioters and killers among the white supremacists from that weekend. This lawsuit by the victims from Charlottesville targets the leaders of white supremacist organizations. And in fact, it targets the organizations themselves and the websites that they run, basically to try to dismantle them, to hold them to account for having not just organized that white power event, but specifically for having planned and organized the violence that took place at that white power event. So we've been watching that suit by the Charlottesville victims really closely. And today, as we head into this weekend's anniversary of Charlottesville, today, a federal judge decided to hand down a little bit of an anniversary present. Today, a federal judge ordered sanctions against some of the primary organizers of the white power violence that took place in Charlottesville 2 years ago. One organization, a group called Vanguard America, the guy who killed Heather Heyer was seen at the Charlottesville riots holding a shield that had the Vanguard America logo on it. That organization and 2 other white supremacist leaders who took part in organizing the violence in Charlottesville, today they were all, that organization and those 2 people were ordered by a federal judge to pay the attorney's fees of the plaintiffs, to pay the attorney's fees of these 10 victims who were injured by the violent white supremacist in Charlottesville. That organization and these 2 white supremacist leaders are among 24 individuals and groups who are defendants in this Charlottesville lawsuit. They have been flouting court orders and ignoring the judge in this case from the very beginning. Well, today, the federal judge hearing that case had enough, saying, quote, defendants have continually failed to fulfill even their most basic obligations to this court. Their behavior has, quote, stalled the litigation's progress for months on end. The judge said today, quote, this behavior is unacceptable and will be sanctioned. Quote, ordinary defendants must participate in the ordinary process of litigation, even if they do not want to. According to the nonprofit group that is supporting this litigation against the neo-Nazi groups and the white supremacist groups that organized the violence in Charlottesville, they're called Integrity First for America. They see these sanctions today as basically a wholly appropriate way to mark the anniversary of what happened 2 years ago in Virginia. Quote, these sanctions, quote, over and over again, these defendants have defied court orders in an attempt to avoid accountability for the racist violence they planned and caused in Charlottesville. These sanctions make clear that time is up. Today marks one more important step forward in holding these neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and hate groups accountable for their actions. So, like I said right at the top there, happy Friday. Just a little something to hold in your heart this weekend. Literally, the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists who did what they did in Charlottesville, not only are they being sued by the people who got hurt there, but those white supremacists have just been ordered by a judge to pay the victims' attorney's fees, which means the neo-Nazis are now being ordered by a court to pay for the privilege of themselves being sued and to pay the costs of the attorneys who are suing them. Hold that in your heart a little bit. Let that keep you warm this weekend. Because of President Trump's attitude toward this particular type of violent extremism, because of his public indifference or even indulgence of this type of extremism and even this type of violent extremism, there is now this super unsettling prospect that we're confronting now as a country, particularly in the wake of El Paso, that the federal government, which Donald Trump controls, might not be the best place to turn to for our country to try to address this specific type of terrorism. Because of that, because of the president's sotto voce alliance with white nationalism in this country, it has been interesting to look at these civil cases where it's not the Justice Department, it's the victims themselves, taking it upon themselves to try to identify the terrorist groups that have encouraged and organized this violence, finding them out, identifying their role in promoting this stuff, and through these lawsuits, disrupting them as organizations, potentially bankrupting them as organizations. It's a really interesting tactic right now, in large part because it doesn't depend on Donald Trump's Justice Department doing the right thing about these kinds of crimes and this kind of organized terrorism. And as we head into this weekend and this anniversary, I think it's worth noting that these types of cases are really on a roll right now. It's not just the Charlottesville case where they got that bang-up order just today from that federal judge. It's also a new ruling today from a different federal judge involving the country's most long-standing and, frankly, most putrid online neo-Nazi gathering place. It's a website called The Daily Stormer. It's named as an homage to a Nazi newspaper from the Third Reich. You might have heard over the last couple of months that the Daily Stormer has been on the receiving end of some really expensive lightning bolts thrown at them in court by some of their past victims. In June, it was comedian and commentator Dean Obeidallah. A couple of years ago, Dean Obeidallah had written a column for the Daily Beast in which he described a bunch of murders that had been committed in the first year of Donald Trump's presidency by killers who had expressed white supremacist beliefs or motives. The column said in part, quote, "Trump refuses to call these acts what they are, white supremacist terrorism." Well, the neo-Nazis at The Daily Stormer, a website that, it should be noted, endorsed Donald Trump for president, they did not like that criticism against President Trump in that column by Dean Obeidallah, and they responded the following day by making up some fake tweets that they attributed to Mr. Obeidallah. And they published those fake tweets online, which made it look like Mr. Obeidallah was actually a terrorist. They had these fake tweets made where he appeared to be taking credit for various violent terrorist attacks around the globe, using this false information that they put online. They then directed white supremacist trolls and neo-Nazis around the country and around the world to go get Dean Obeidallah and to go threaten him, which of course they did to massive and terrifying effect. Well, you can't necessarily do that. And in June, a federal judge handed down a $4.1 million judgment against the Daily Stormer, against that neo-Nazi website and the guy who runs it, ordering the website and its publisher to pay $4.1 million to Dean Obeidallah. Now, it is a good question as to whether or not they're going to be able to get that money and how. But Mr. Obeidallah told the New York Times in response to that judge's ruling that he full-on plans to pursue all of their assets in the United States. Quote, "We want to collect some money because that's a more powerful message than just a judgment on paper. We're going to give their money to organizations that fight white supremacy, run by the very people these guys hate, like Muslims, African Americans, Jewish Americans, and the LGBTQ community." That was June. Then in July, last month, happened again. The same neo-Nazi outfit and its same publisher was hit this time with a $14 million judgment for having directed an anti-Semitic terror campaign against a Jewish woman in Montana who ran a business in the hometown of white supremacist leader Richard Spencer. That $14 million judgment was ordered by a magistrate judge. It's now being reviewed by a federal district court judge. But you're starting to get a sense of how these things are going. If you are ever motivated in your life, God forbid, to make a donation to the Daily Stormer, your donation will now be garnished, will now be taken by the court and instead given to these victims of online racist and anti-Semitic attacks waged by the Daily Stormer and its adherents. It's nice. And now today, again, happy Friday, it's happened again. There's a new one. Again, this just happened today. It's been kind of a bang-up day. This time it concerns this young woman. Seen here in this footage we're about to show you in a very happy moment after winning an election. This is footage from the on-campus TV station at her school.
President Taylor Dumpton.
Crowds cheered when Taylor's name was announced. We caught up with Taylor, and here's what she had to say.
I don't have words for this. I don't have any words. I'm shocked. I'm so ecstatic. Honestly, I can't help but thank God for this.
Her name is Taylor Dumpton, and in the spring of 2017, she won. March 2017, she was elected student body president at American University in Washington, D.C., the first African-American woman to ever be elected to that position. Great day. The day after she actually took office as student body president, though, somebody on campus took it upon himself to tie up a bunch of little nooses to hang up all over the American University campus. There were nooses made out of black cord, and they were holding bananas in case the racial implications weren't quite clear enough. Also, on some of them were written the initials AKA for Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is the sorority to which AU President Dumpson belonged. So this was this shocking, racist incident at American University in Washington. It got some news pickup when it happened. But what happened after that is what brings us to the judge's ruling today. Because when news articles appeared about this racist taunting at this college, these nooses and bananas that had been posted on campus in response to this young woman's election as president, when those news articles started circulating, they were seized on by this neo-Nazi online hub, by this Daily Stormer website, where the founder of the website thought that this racist harassment campaign against the new university president was excellent news. And he thought that what all the neo-Nazis and white supremacists on his site should do in response is ramp up their own kinds of harassment and attacks on her as much as they could. They posted personal information about her. They explicitly encouraged their members to attack her. And that unleashed a torrent of neo-Nazi abuse and violent threats against this kid, right? Against this young woman who had done nothing whatsoever other than to be an African-American woman and to be recognized by her peers, by her fellow students, by the student body of American University as the one best suited among them for the top leadership role that they had. Well, today, a federal judge in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia awarded that young woman, Taylor Dumpson, more than $700,000 in damages and attorney's fees to be paid by the Nazis, to be paid by the Daily Stormer and its founder that directed this tirade of abuse and violent threats against her. That case was brought on Taylor Dumpson's behalf by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. The lawyer who led that case joins us next. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.